Hello everyone and welcome to the Game Engine programming series where I write a game engine from scratch. In the last video we finished working on the project browser dialog and now we can create and open new projects. But we can't do anything with our new projects yet because we don't have the main editor interface. And today I would like to start working on this part of the editor that I'll call the WorldEditor. And that's the part of the primal editor that we can use to create our game engine with. So we can add new scenes and delete scenes and add game objects to those scenes and pretty much everything that you need to do to create a game. So today I would like to start with this WorldEditor. Perhaps I can show you first what I have in mind for the WorldEditor. And unsurprisingly, it's pretty much the same as any other game engine interface. As you can see, there is a menu part, there is an icon part, there is a renderer. And here on this side, on the right side, we have the scenes, and each scene can contain game objects, lights, cameras, etc. Are our game entities. And whenever we select one of these objects, then here down on the right side, we can see the properties of that selected object. And maybe I'll have here a kind of content browser as well to keep track of our game assets and resources that we'll use in our game. So this is what I'm going to try and make in the next couple of videos. And today I would like to just start with the larger building blocks. Obviously, the renderer will require like maybe 10 or 20 videos of its own because, well, we are going to program an entire graphics engine for this game engine. That's not something that I can do today, of course. So it will take time to construct all of these elements. So today I'll just set up the interface and start by making the functionality to be able to add scenes and maybe remove them and see where we can, how far we can go today. Going back to Visual Studio. Here I can collapse this and this game project folder now. I would like to add a new folder. And that's the folder for all the editors that the level editor will contain. I think there will be more editors than just the WorldEditor, like a kind of editor that would view textures, for example, and where we can also set texture encoding and those kind of stuff. There will be an editor for 3D models as well. So there we can inspect and configure our game models. And yeah, for every kind of asset that we have, practically we will have an editor, like a material editor and an animation editor, etc. So those editors all go in this folder. Here for the WorldEditor, I'll add a subfolder, call it WorldEditor, obviously. And in here, I add a user control. So I want all my editors to be accessible using a namespace that is primal editor editors. By the way, I'm going to rename this to editors. So I'm going to remove every thing that comes with a subfolder. So we have like editors, and I'm world editor view. Save this. And here I'm going to remove this as well. Now what I can do in main window, in the grid, first add a namespace. And then in editors, I can include this world view, world editor view. This will contain the world editor view in the main window. So for example, if I now set a background color of the world editor to blue, then in the main window, if I compile this, let's see what is going wrong here. Back to the world editor. And here I forgot to remove this namespace as well. Editors, like so. Now we can see the world editor in the main window. Next, I want to divide this space into parts that I just showed you. For now, I'm going to do this with a grid, with grid rows and columns. Later on, in a couple of episodes, I'm probably going to spend one of those blue episodes to one or maybe two of those blue episodes to write a docking manager, so we can have movable tabs, so we can reconfigure the interface like Visual Studio here. But for now, I'm just going to use grid rows and columns. And in between, I want to have a grid splitter. And for each of these grids, between these rows, I would like to have a grid splitter as well. So here, let's see what we have now. Open one of our projects. And as you can see, I have got grid splitters here. I can move this one. I can't move those. So let me check what is going on here. These grid splitters were centered vertically. Now that I made them align to the top of the grid row, then now I can move them. Okay, so I think this main window is a bit small. I'll make it a bit bigger. So I'll have like a full HD dimensions. Now on this side, I would like to have this project layout tree or list of objects or scenes. So for that, I'm going to make another user control. Here, I would like to have a button to add new scenes to the project and display the list of scenes that I have. So again, I'm going to have two grid rows. And in the second row, I'll have a scroll viewer that displays a list of scenes. So here I can say for each element in the stack panel how it should be displayed. So here I have a data template, and I know that now I have a scene that should be displayed. And the scene is a expander, and the expander will contain a list of game objects. I want the scene that is active at this moment to be expanded. You see, I don't have auto-completion here for the properties in scenes. I can tell Visual Studio that I want that by letting it construct a debug instance of the project. I, of course, need to add a namespace for where the project class is. Now, as you can see, I have this auto-completion. Of course, I don't want my scene to become inactive whenever I collapse this expander, so I'll make it one way. And in the header, for now, I'll just have a text block that displays the name of the scene. And in the body of the expander, for now, I'll just have a border with a blue background. If now I put this control in the World editor, I probably could see the one scene that we have in our project. So here in the first row of the second column, which is this part, I can now put the this project layout view. Of course, I still need to remove this namespace so I can access it from the same editor's namespace. One thing I also want to do is that whenever I open this project browser dialog, I want the first project already be active and selected. So I can just hit enter and it will open it instead of me going with the mouse pointer over it and trying to select it. So now I open that project. I can see that there is this default scene, and yeah, I didn't give this the body of this expander that contained the border a height, so we can't see it. But thanks to edit and continue, I can just go here and say, okay, this border has a height of 100 now. And I can see here right away that, yeah, it's a blue background from the expander. This button doesn't do anything yet, of course. So I'm going to write the code behind for this to add a new scene to the project. Okay, here I can get the project, the data context. And since I can't add scenes here, because it's a read-only observable collection, I need to write a method in project that would allow me to add a new scene. So here I can create a method called add scene. And of course, I need a method to remove the scene. Now I can go back to project layout view, and here I can call add scene with a new name. Something like this. There are all these new scenes. That works. And here in the open project view, as I was telling you before, I wanted this to be already selected. So that means that whenever this control is loaded, I need to have its focus on the list box of the projects. So what this does is it gets the first item in the list box as a list box item. And if there is one, then it calls the focus method to give it the focus of the window. So now when I run the project, then I see that there is already an active list box item here. And I can just go around with the arrow keys, and when I press enter, it gets loaded. So now we have the ability to add new scenes. One of the first things I want to have in the editor is the ability to undo things, because that's one of the most important functionalities that you want to have in a game editor. That's the ability to go back to a previous state, because you're making a game and you want to be able to try different things, and you can't miss an undo redo system when you are trying to do that. So let's set up a simple undo redo class. Here I add a new class. This acts like a manager for undo and redo commands that we have. And the way I want to implement it is by having an interface for each undoable action. And this interface has a name, or each undo redo action has a name. And a method to undo, and a method to redo. Here in UndoRedo class, I'll have two lists for undo actions and redo actions. I won't use a normal list because I want to visualize the undo redo commands later on in a history. So I'll again use the observable collections for this. I'll have a method to reset these lists to make them empty again. Here in the constructor, I'll assign these lists that are private to the read-only observable collections. And then I'll have two more methods that I can call to undo and redo. And they are undo and redo. So in undo method, I check if there is anything to undo. In other words, if undo list has any elements, then I'll pick the last thing that was added to it. So the last action that we did. And then now I have a reference to the last element. And because I'm going to undo this, I have to remove it from the list. And this command is an undo redo. So I can just call undo method from this interface. And then add it to the redo list. I'm going to insert it at the beginning of the redo list. Because the way I'm going to visualize these lists is that the undo list is from the first element to the last element or item, and the redo list will be displayed from the last element to the first one. So that's why I'm adding this command to the beginning of the redo list. In the redo method, I'm going to do the reverse of this. So I check if there is anything to redo. And now because I added the elements in the beginning of the redo list, I'll have to get it from the start as well, instead of the last element. So this time the command will be from redo list first element. And then I'll remove it from the list as well. Call the redo method from the command. And then add it to the undo list. Okay, here should be remove at. Okay. So the first time we do something in the editor, we want to have a method to add that action to this UndoRedo class as well. So I need another method. This is just add. And it adds an UndoRedo Action command to the undo list. And because we just started a new action, we have to clear the redo list as well. Okay. Now, one first simple implementation of this UndoRedo is a class that would be an UndoRedo action. So in this class, we will have two actions that describe what needs to be done to undo something and what needs to be done to redo something. And we simply call these actions whenever undo or redo are called. And in the constructor, we need to set a name for this action. And another constructor that will accept the action for undo and redo. As well as a name. The way I want to use this mechanism for undo and redo is to define commands in our view models. And whenever a property is changed by executing a command, then the command code will add an undo and redo action to the UndoRedo class. And whenever we change a property some other way, then it won't be included in the UndoRedo list. So for example, here, instead of calling these methods from project to add a scene or remove a scene, I'll make these private. And call them add scene internal and remove scene internal. And then I'll have two commands for this. So now I can, here in a constructor, define a command that would add or remove a scene. For this, I'm going to use relate command. That is an implementation of the iCommand interface that would allow us to define a custom way of executing the command. So here in common, I'll add a new class. relay command class. Again, I want this to be accessible from everywhere, so I remove this common namespace. And this will be a generic class that implements iCommand. Here I'll have for the for this event have an add and remove from command manager. In the can execute, I just check if I can execute the action. So first, I'll remember what actions need to be done. So here I can put in what needs to be done, and here a check to determine if it can be done. And I can set these in a constructor. This predicate can execute is optional. And whenever it's null, then we just return true. We assume that it can be executed. So here, if execute is null, then we throw an exception, and otherwise we just set it to this private field. Can execute is of course optional, so we just set it. And here in can execute method, I just return the value of can execute if it's not null, and true otherwise. So now we can have commands, actions in commands, and we can have command parameters that we can use in our controls to execute actions. Now in project, where I added these two commands, I'm going to have here on the serialized, that is executed after the serialization or after a project instance is created. I can go here and define an add scene command. So this is the body of the command that will be executed, because I'm now using this constructor. So the first parameter is the action, and the second one is a check whether this action can be done. So what happens when we want to add a scene is basically I want to call this this method. So first I call add scene internal with this name. And then I have to remember what I want to do to undo this. That means that I need a reference to the scene that just got created in this method. And whenever that needs to be undone, I remove that scene. So first, I remember this new scene that is added. So this method just adds a scene to the end of the list. And that's the one I remember here. I also need to remember the index of this scene. And now I can add an UndoRedo action to one of these UndoRedo managers. So first I'll add an UndoRedo manager in my project class. Of course, I have a public class here, and this UndoRedo is not public. I need to make it public as well. And I'm going back to my add scene command. Here, I can add to UndoRedo a new UndoRedo action. And I'm going to use this constructor to define the undo and redo actions. So the first action is the undo action. The second one is a redo action. And finally, the name of this UndoRedo action. So what we did was to add a scene. Okay, so the first parameter is the undo action. The undo action for add scene would be remove scene. And I just call remove scene internal with this new scene that we created. That's why I had to remember what we just created here. And in the redo action, I re-add this new scene to where it was. So here, insert scene index, add scene index. And this is basically the add scene command. Now let's write the command for removing a scene. This time the argument, the generic argument for relay command is a scene. That's the scene that we want to remove. I'm going to, again, remember where this scene is in case I want to undo this action. I need to add it back to where it was. So I need to know where from the list it's coming from. And then again, add to UndoRedo what needs to be done to undo this this action. The undo action is that we add the scene back to where it was. And the redo action is that we remove it again. And in this case, we also can define this can execute predicate to determine if we can remove a scene or not. We only want to remove scenes that are not active. We don't want to remove a scene that's currently loaded in the editor. So the predicate will be that the scene is not active. Going back to our project layout view, now I can, instead of use this click event handler, bind a command from our project view model to this button that gets executed whenever we click on it. Here we see our commands displayed. Here's one for removing a scene, and here's one for adding the scene. So this will be add scene, and therefore we also don't need this function anymore. Again, we need to be consistent with the accessibility of all these classes and interfaces. Now, when I click on add scene, we should get new scenes. So that works. Now I'm going to add a temporary button to remove scenes as well, and then we can test if our undo-redo system works. So go back to project layout, and in each expander header, now I can have a button next to this title, to this name. When we remove a scene, we also have to give the command a reference to the scene that we are removing as a command parameter. And that's just the scene that is currently being displayed by this element in the stack panel. So we just use the binding. Now, to test this undo-redo system, I'm going to add a couple of buttons to the world editor to undo and redo as well. I'm going to add another row to this grid. So again, instead of writing a click event handler for these buttons, I just add in a project 2 more commands that I can use to undo and redo. And here in our initialization method, I just create another couple of relay commands. So whenever we click undo the undo method from UndoRedo is executed, and for redo, the redo method. And here in the world editor, I can again bind to these commands. These are all temporary stuff here, so don't worry about the UI design right now. Lastly, I just want to create a list that would display our undo and redo actions here in the lower left corner. So for that, I'll add a user control. So this contains just two lists, two stack panels that are binded to these two observable collections. Okay, so this is for our undo list, which is on top, and underneath we have the redo list. And these ones will be gray. So there is a color difference between the undo and redo items. And of course, I need to have this control in my world editor. I need to add an namespace to access utilities namespace. And in utilities, I can have this undo redo, and its data context is the undo redo of my project. And of course, I need to tell it in which row it should be displayed. And that's in the second row. Let's run and see what happens now. Now I add a scene. So it does work. I can add scenes now, and I can click redo, and nothing happens because we haven't undone anything yet. I can undo addition of these scenes. As you can see, the scenes now get removed. And I can redo this action. And now I can, for example, remove this new scene 1, remove new scene 1. And I can undo that. And it's inserted back to where it was. That's good. And now with a new action, my redo list is gone. So that works as intended. 3, 5, and 7 go. 1 as well. And then undo 7, 5, 3. Okay. I think I'm happy with what I have done today. And for now, I think I'll stop. at this point. So to summarize today's work, we did actually a lot of stuff. We did create a new interface for the level editor, the world editor. And in there, we have now a button to add scenes, and each scene that is displayed has a button that we can use to remove it. In addition to that, we did a simple but effective undo-redo system using relay commands to execute commands directly from the user controls in our view model. And in the view models, we define for each command that is executed also what needs to be done to undo and redo that action. Yeah, this would be a good point to stop for today. And for the next time, I am going to start working on the game objects that we can add to the scenes. So that would be the introduction to our game entity system and components. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please feel free to like and subscribe. If you join me on Patreon, you'll get access to the code on GitHub, so you don't have to type everything over from the video. Plus, there are also other nice goodies and rewards exclusive to my Patreon supporters. Please use the link in the video description to check them out. I hope to see you next time. Until then, take care and happy game engineering!